Hello everyone, I'm Cole from the Kingdom. I'm joined here with Essem Jay. She runs a Thedas food blog. Where can people find you?
Hi, people can find me at Gourmet Vegan Thedas on Blogspot. I'm also on Twitter at Foods of Thedas, and people can also find me on Instagram under Gourmet Vegan Thedas. My blog explores the food and drink of and inspired by the world of Dragon Age, and I've been doing it about a year. It's a lot of fun, and it's really great to be here with you today. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining me. So today we are talking about Mythal, a huge, huge headache for everyone involved. Uh, so one thing I do want to start with is identifying the difference between Mythal and Flemeth,
Hmm.
because you'll notice in her scene with Inquisition, she talks about Mythal both in first person and third person.
Yes, which does
Um,
get a little confusing if you're not as immersed in the lore as, say, someone like you.
it gets confusing even if you're immersed in the lore like me.
She is a striking figure, certainly. Both her and Flemeth and the two of them combined. It's almost like three people in one character. It's astonishing.
That's a good way to look at it. Where yeah, so the Flemeth as we think of her just carries a wisp of Mythal.
Mhm.
Uh,
A
so
few
it's
1,000-year-old wisp.
yes, yes. So we should talk about how. Well, I guess let's start at the beginning of Mythal's timeline. So she's a
Okay.
goddess in Elgar'nan, or worshipped as a goddess. She is betrayed by Solus says all of the other Evanuris, which I don't buy it.
Mm, yeah, I'm on the fence about that too.
I find it hard to believe that they were all as evil as he claims. He's a very
Hmm.
biased source.
I agree with you there. There is bias, absolutely. But yeah, regarding her origins, she is referred to as this all mother, this goddess of love, this patron of equality and justice. What equality perhaps in quotes, considering
Right.
what we know about the ancient Evanuris and their society as a predominantly slave-based society, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But she's largely seen as a protector and is invoked as a protector, as a defender,
Right.
like a mom, basically.
Yeah. Motherhood is kind of like the defining trait of
Hmm.
Flemeth and Mythal.
Hmm. For different reasons too, but I think we'll go more into that later.
Yeah, well, we'll get into that in a little bit. So, her husband was Elgar'nan, the god of vengeance. He seems like uh, he's probably the one who, I guess, came up with the plan to murder Mythal.
Possibly, yes. The betrayer, the initial betrayer.
Right. And then he would have gathered the others. And there are any number of reasons why that would be. But the reason I think this is because throughout all of Mythal's scenes across the games, you'll notice she really does have a low opinion of men.
Oh, very much.
I mean, even what Morrigan will parrot to the warden, she talks about the hearts of men.
Hmm.
One of the first things Flemeth even says is, "Men's hearts hold secrets darker than any blight," or something along that line.
Yeah, darker than any taint or something.
Mm-hmm.
Something certainly related to the Darkspawn, which has continually been referred to as like the ultimate evil. So like, what
Yeah.
does it really say about men's hearts? Oh my goodness. Either she thinks they are utterly predictable and shallow, or that they have such an evil and selfishness about them that cannot be helped. It's again, I feel a bit biased of her, but she has had a very negative history of being betrayed, not just Mythal, but also Flemeth as well. It makes me feel like that's why. I think even in the Fade, if you have Kieran in that timeline, in after the or after the Arbor Wilds in
Right.
Dragon Age Inquisition, she even says that she, clawed and crawled her way to me. Like she was chosen. Flemeth was chosen because perhaps
Yeah.
of the betrayal that she experienced.
Flemeth says, I'm going to try to quote, I knew the hearts of men even before Mythal came to me. It is why she came to me.
Yes. Yes. So that sort of shared disdain and distrust.
Because at that point, we know Flemeth had also been betrayed by two men? I don't recall the story exactly.
Her story, gosh, yes, her story was with Ban Konabar, and she was Flemeth of Highever, who was taken as his bride, and but fell in love. And this is more, I guess, Liliana's telling of the story. You get two versions
Right.
in Origins, one from Morrigan, one from Liliana, and I think there's also a codex entry about the Witch of the Wilds, the tales of the Witch of the Wilds in Dragon Age Origins, about how she ran off with her bard lover and then was tricked into coming back to say goodbye to her first love, Konabar, but it was a trap. He locked her in a tower, killed her lover, Osen.
I think it was Osen.
Osen. And from there, she took on the a spirit and became an abomination and wreaked havoc upon Konavar's lands as a result of that.
Right.
And is that Mythal that's becoming that spirit of abomination? Is that what kind of started this whole legend? There's so much going on in between the words and the lines here.
I mean, I like the scene in Inquisition where you can say, I know the name Flemeth. You were sold to a lover or husband, and then he killed your lover and imprisoned you. And she's like, someday someone will describe the horrible events of your life so quickly. And she says, yes, I was that woman crying out alone for justice in the dark.
Mm-hmm. And Mythal crawled and clawed her way to me, to me. The way she says that with such righteousness.
And I guess we should talk about how Mythal got to that point.
Mm-hmm. There's a big gap there between her betrayal of Elgar'nan and getting to Mythal, like ages and ages of time.
It's over 1,000 years, I think, if I remember correctly. And so there's the theory she did travel from host to host. Flemeth was just the most prominent one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
However, this is just occurring to me.
Mm-hmm.
She may have done this thing in Dragon Age 2 where she gives you the Horcrux, which isn't called a Horcrux, but it's clearly a Horcrux.
We can call it that.
You take the locket or the trinket, and then she's revived. So, I mean, maybe she just did the same thing back then too.
Yeah, the game really showed they just kind of presented the truth to us there in that moment when you take the amulet to the altar of Mythal.
Right. So maybe she was
on the spirit like that. I feel like in hindsight, going over that scene again, where you bring it there, Meryl does her little prayer, and there is Flemeth. Like that should have. After knowing what I know, I look at that scene like I should have known.
Yeah.
There's Mythal. There she is, right there.
So it seems to me that, after her death in Elgar'nan, she had another Horcrux type thing. Mm-hmm. And then 1,000 years later, she is awoken and finds Flemeth, I guess.
Yeah, because how did it make its way to Flemeth? How did it make its way to Ferelden? That's my question. because there are some sites around Thedas that hold very strong mythal significance, or at least mythal supplicant significance. There's the altar in Sundermount, and there's the Arbor Wilds. There's the temple to Mythal, and the altar to Mythal, also in the Arbor Wilds area. Where does Ferelden play into all this, and how could have something like an amulet holding her spirit made its way there? It really strikes me. Also, the significance of Sundermount as well in various legends.
Yeah, because Sundermount was in the Free Marches.
Mm-hmm.
Headaches.
I know, right? Oh, it makes my head hurt. I think, and maybe this is related to Avar Tale a little bit here too, because jumping to Tyr to Brightaxe, the Avar mother, the one who led the Avar to the Frostbacks, and also had a leaf-eared lover. And we have to take into account the idea that the Lady of the Skies in Mythal could be the same person, yes, perhaps, or related in some way. That perhaps whatever held Mythal's spirit that was able to make it to Mythal was perhaps something carried by the Avar, either as an amulet, as a staff. I'm very struck by the legend mark Tyr to Brightaxe, obviously marking her, in hindsight, if you've read all the Codex entries, as a mage.
Right.
Done all the warboard, Tyr to Brightaxe related quests, which I love the warboard, by the way. Personal note, I love the warboard. I feel that maybe this Avar tribe, these sort of the beginnings of the Avar, had something to do with Mythal and bringing her spirit somewhere.
Right. The Avar are... they seem to be involved in a lot more than it would seem on the surface.
Mm-hmm. They seem to be kind of like a vessel, a cultural vessel of the remnants of elven lore and literature and of the great empire that they were. I think that, but depending on where, I'm trying to remember where in the timeline the Avar appeared, because they didn't appear with the rest of the humans. They fled from far to the west from a shadow goddess destroying their home, is sort of the official tale.
Was it like all the way west, or?
I think so, like far west.
When I first read this, I thought it was just from the Orlais area.
Maybe. I guess I got the idea that it was beyond Orlais. And somewhere beyond there, in game, there are scholars, quote, that mention that it could have been a natural disaster. But when you talk to Solus at Skyhold and you ask him about spirits in the Fade, he will tell you that he met the shadow goddess that drove her prey away. Mm-hmm. And I wonder if the attraction, just from an ancient Avar perspective, the Lady of the Skies perhaps was sort of an easy deity to pick up because of their previous religion or faith or folklore around this shadow goddess. It's always referred to as a goddess. So women and women's worship, spiritual worship, seems to play an important role in Avar mythology, which I feel like, as subtle as Mythal is, would just fit right in with her agenda in a way. What if the Avar were just kind of used? Maybe that's not the right word, but
I get what you're saying. That's actually a really interesting point.
Yeah.
We should probably not go too deep into the Avar.
Yeah, maybe we should stop here.
But no, that's actually a really great point. I'll need to look more into that. So where are we?
Trying to get to Flemeth.
Okay, so yeah, let's go into that. The nature of Flemeth and Mythal. When we encounter Flemeth and Inquisition, we see I've completely lost my train of thought, but I'm going to keep talking. Sure. So the
she talks a little bit about the process in such vague terms. And I don't know, it's almost like a faith-based realization in a lot of ways, where something just kind of clicks in your mind and you feel like you know how your life is supposed to go. You kind of, mixing real world thought into this. I kind of look at her transformation from Mythal to Flemeth, and like I said, to kind of into this third person with this agenda as like an epiphany, like an emerging from a chrysalis. This is my purpose.
Let's talk about how this bond works, because as you said, that it's like a third person, like Mythal and Flemeth come together to make this new entity. But then we want to talk about, her possessing our daughters. And how does that work? Because, the way Yavanna described it in the Silent Grove is that it was a gift. It was something very, very special. But, Morgan just read the grimoire and thought, this is terrible, she's going to just possess my body.
Yeah, there was like a violent or like a coercive act,
right,
at best, in her mind.
Right.
How old is Yavanna depicted to be in the Silent Grove? Like, I never really got a clear idea of her age. Is she about the same age as Morgan, or do we get the idea that she's older?
She would have been around in the Blessed Age, at least. Because that was when near the end of the Blessed Age is when dragons returned. And we know she was responsible for that.
Wasn't there also a reference to an Antivan Witch of the Wilds regarding Xenon? Because he made
yes.
a deal for immortality. And bear with me here on this. So we have, and he was around during the Steel Age or Storm Age, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
One of those two. I always confuse the two, the Steel Age and the Storm Age. Why do they have to have two SD names right next to each other? Thank you, divines. / developers. The other C word. Anyway, so there has been an Antivan Witch of the Wilds, which we can assume is related to Flemeth in some way, either like maybe like a split of that spirit, like part of, again, with the Horcrux idea, part of her spirit is in one body, part of her spirit is in another. Because Yavanna's been around for a long time, and I'm curious to know if like a different, maybe less reincarnated Flemeth maybe had been a little kinder and maybe had been a little more transparent about her intentions with Yavanna, thus influencing Yavanna's belief that this is a gift, this is my purpose, again with the whole chrysalis and becoming a whole person, this is what I'm meant to do, compared to Morgan's experience, which was one of really tragedy and abuse and neglect.
Oh,
I know that's a lot to unpack there, but I guess as a mom,
yeah, no, that's all like good.
It's striking that we have one daughter of unknown age and unknown, I guess, longevity. How many ages she's been around. Ultimately, one who has really grown up and settled into this idea of bringing the next age. She did bring the next age with the dragons.
That is
and
true.
Out there that has been. I used to hate Morgan. Truth be told, I used to downright hate Morgan. And then I watched Gilder Thallin's character profile on her, and I'm like, oh, boy, I really have to. That changed my thinking. I feel bad for hating her now because she's a victim of abuse and of this lifelong, centuries-long vengeance of Mythal and Flemeth, sort of their combined hatred for men, for the way things turned out. Their bitterness has just influenced them. I'm really curious about what type of experience Yavanna had over Morgan. It's just incredibly striking.
That is a really great thing to ponder. And we have absolutely nothing to, we have no details as to that, but it's, oh, damn it. I feel like that is deserving of a fanfic.
Yeah, it really is. I think so. Similar to, I mean, there was the Penny Arcade comic that showed a little bit, a sliver of Morgan and Flemeth slash Mythal. I feel like there is a lot of potential for a lot of creativity with Yavanna and how she was raised. Absolutely. I am always wary about speculation in a lot of ways because it's kind of like expecting yourself to fly by lifting yourself by the seat of your pants. If you build too many ifs off an if, you're just sitting there holding your back belt loop up. So it's easy to blur those lines of speculation, but it's really fascinating. I wish we knew more, and maybe we will have more. We are going to Deventer. We are going north. Perhaps we may get an opportunity in the next game to actually meet the Witch of the Antivan Wilds and hear more about her story and her upbringing. We know that Morgan,
another witch.
Or another witch, perhaps.
I just have to say, I love the scene in Inquisition where you meet Flemeth and Morgan finally says all the things that she had been wanting to say, like, I will not be the mother that you were to me, and Flemeth appears visibly hurt by that. Oh, that was an amazing scene.
Cathartic.
Yeah. So Flemeth supposedly possesses her daughters. See, when I heard from Morgan, or from that scene, that Morgan had misunderstood, I assumed, okay, Flemeth was just going to pass down Mythal's essence into Morgan, and then Morgan would become the new Flemeth. But in that scene, she talks about like she was the original. She was the woman in the tower that was betrayed. So
consciousness, memory, and all. Right.
So I'm wondering if she's straight up lying to Morgan, and that she didn't understand. She did understand, or you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Or if it's like this thing where Morgan is then joined into this third entity, like you mentioned.
Yeah. This sort of sharing of will and consciousness.
Right.
And that does remind me in turn of the Well of Sorrows. Like, okay. The origin of the Well of Sorrows is very interesting to me. This idea of priests, these high priests, passing on their knowledge, their memory, their collective will from one priest to the next in we assume a successive order. And I feel that from what we know about Evanir's and ancient elven culture in a lot of ways, that elves tried to emulate in a lot of ways what the Evanir's did or could do. So it may not be too far-fetched to consider that Mythal had an ability to pass on her collective will from maybe body to body. I sort of ascribe to this theory that the elves were spirits that took on physical forms. And with that, it sort of rings in my mind Solas's words, the first of my people are not easy to kill. You met Mythal. He just sort of says it almost shrugging.
The thing that comes to mind when you mention that is Kieran, what he says to, if he's an old god baby, what he says to the Elven Inquisitor, he says, I just don't know why your people want to look like that.
Yeah.
So it's like they chose that form.
Yeah. So perhaps Mythal was even body hopping before she was murdered.
I'm not sure what the point of that would be.
I don't know. Yeah, maybe she is a master of subtlety.
That is true.
And I think that Fen'Harel may have learned a lot of subtlety from her. It's possible she could have, and she could also shapeshift. She could shapeshift into a great serpent, which we can also assume, possibly meant either literally a great serpent or a dragon.
Right.
Something akin to that. I'm willing to bet that this passing on of a collective consciousness of the many past Mythals is some kind of magic, perhaps unique to her specifically.
Possibly. Yeah, I could see her having that knowledge and keeping it from everyone else.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The elves, I guess, were fond of doing that.
Yes. I have a feeling that in Mythal's court, it is a sneaky, backstabby one. Perhaps not as benevolent as we are led to believe. But she was also a mom, and I guess as a mom, you sometimes just keep secrets from your kids, or just don't mention things. It's not even so much secret keeping as, you know what, we're just not even going to mention that because I don't want you to get excited about it.
Well, I mean, looking at Soulless, this very, judgmental black and white guy, even he was in awe of Mythal, and he ascribed her to be, benevolent isn't the right word, but
very wise.
Wise and a friend. He considered her a friend. Speaking of Soulless and all that, do you think Flemeth or Mythal is dead?
Ooh.
I don't. Yeah. I don't for a second.
Really? You think that he's hanging out in Fen'Harel?
Either that, or Horcrux, or
another Horcrux.
Is sending her spirit through that alluvian. She's got an ace in the hole.
I honestly think that spirit she sent through the alluvian is the old god. Samuel. One way or another.
Well, it happens. Even if Urthemiel,
however that phrase goes, I think that is still Urthemiel. But to answer your question directly, no, I don't think Mythal is dead, because we still have Yavanna.
Except we don't.
Did she die? I haven't read the Silent Grove.
Oh yeah, I guess spoiler alert. But yeah, no, Alistair kind of drove a sword through her heart.
Oh, well, no.
Yeah, no, Yavanna's...
But is she dead?
But I mean, Flemeth has many daughters, so
yeah.
Even if...
I've heard, I don't know if this is a fan thing or if it's a canon thing from the developers, that there was or is an Arbor Witch of the Wilds. I found literally nothing to back any of that up. I was very hard pressed to find anything, but I remember reading or seeing somewhere something about an Arbor Witch of the Wilds.
I can't think of anything off the top of my head, but yeah, that definitely sounds...
Comment below.
Likely. That definitely seems likely.
Yeah, possible. Okay, so Yavanna's dead. Maybe dead, quote unquote dead. Flemeth, whether she's dead or not, I don't think we are going to see her again. Or perhaps, she made her way to Morrigan. Maybe the next time we see Morrigan, we could see more than just Morrigan, since we don't rightly know exactly how this happens.
That's true.
We never got a chance to read the grimoire. And we never got the opportunity to really talk to Flemeth about the specific process. And I don't think she would have told us the truth, even if we had the dialogue options.
All she says about it, which could be a lie, is that a soul is not forced upon the unwilling.
Yes. Which really just reeks of coercion.
Yeah, gosh, this woman...
It backs up your assertion, too, that it's very likely that not every Evaneris was a dirty, rotten traitor to Mythal. And that Well, I won't say that she brought her doom upon her. I will say that she was certainly not the shining, golden, benevolent goddess that the Dalish believe her to be.
Speaking of which, this is a big thing. I'm glad you reminded me of this.
Mm-hmm.
There is something that greatly differs between Solus and Mythal. We know Solus and Apolos and the other Sentinel elves never identified with the modern elves.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't think they were true elves. Flemeth disagrees because, well, I know this because in Dragon Age 2, when you first meet Flemeth, Merrill bows, and Flemeth asks, "Do you know who I am beyond that name? Beyond the name Asha Belinar?"
Mm-hmm.
Merrill says, "I know only a little," and Mythal says, "Then stand. The people bend their knee too quickly."
Mm-hmm.
She refers to Merrill as the people, as elves. And she does the same to the Inquisitor. She says, "You do the people proud."
Yeah. Yeah, she's not as much into, I guess, that prejudice or that supremacy
Right.
is not there. And we have to remember, too, she's inhabiting the soul of a human.
That
Flemeth
is also true.
is, by all accounts and all appearances that we have seen, a human female mage. And that, which, looking back on that scene between Solus and Flemeth before the Illuvian at the end of Dragon Age Inquisition main game, it's, there is so much history to unravel there. And I mean, Solus does have his prejudices, but he does not treat Mythal with those prejudices, even though very clearly she is inhabiting a human and has for centuries and centuries.
Indeed.
And he knows exactly who she is. I wonder if they had any communication in the Fade. Solus was asleep in Uthenera, basically, from what we assume in Uthenera, right, since the rise of the Veil. And I wonder if they were able to communicate with each other. If he had an idea or was receiving orders or something, some kind of information, or if he was able to watch her, maybe even guide her spirit between bodies. That's again, really entering into the pull yourself up by the seat of your pants territory. A lot of speculation, a lot of ifs built on ifs. But it's certainly worth considering that these two had an experienced history of communicating with each other, probably subtly, because she was very much a part of the establishment of the ancient Elven Empire. She was the leader of that establishment. And yet, from what we see in Trespasser, she very well could have taken, she was very cunning in subverting that order consistently, perhaps to the point that led to the betrayal that she experienced. What were they talking about in the thousands of years since? I don't know. Well, he doesn't know everything of her plan. I think that's fair to assert.
Yeah.
He doesn't know everything. He thinks he does because he's soulless.
I know in the developer's notes, Flemeth knew Solus was coming for her. She knew what was going to happen. And I remember reading, I don't know if this was in the developer notes or not, or if this is just fan speculation, but I read Solus is going to carry out Mythal's reckoning.
Unknowingly or knowingly?
I assume unknowingly.
Unknowingly. One day, the magic will come back. All of it. Everything will be as it once was. The skies will part and blah, blah, blah. I don't remember all of it.
Yeah.
What I most strikingly remember is Flemeth's words to Hawk and what they mean. The world fears the inevitable plummet into the abyss. Watch for that moment. And when it comes, do not hesitate to leap. As a lot of people ascribe that to Hawk being left in the Fade. I think in a lot of ways that after Dragon Age Inquisition, I see that more to mean the end of the veil is coming. The new age is to begin. And when that comes, do not hesitate to embrace that this new state of existence. In your Tranquil video, which I absolutely loved, I had provided you with some research on that. And one of the things that I was really getting into the aluminum foil territory. I will say aluminum foil and not tin foil because we have not used tin in our foil since the 40s. That what actually is consciousness in Thedas?
Ah, God, I'm not going into that. I'm not touching that with a 10-foot stick.
Okay. I'm saying to put a brief little capstone on this tangent. I think that Mythal obviously knows more about what's at stake, what the end goal is going to be, and what this change, what is beyond this precipice, what it's going to look like. Far better than Solus does, because he's very wrapped up in a kind of supremacy, admittedly, a kind of prejudice, and is. While, yes, there are those out there that will apologize for him, he is coming to destroy the world, and there's no apologizing for that. Yeah. So I think that she's, as much of an enigma she is, she knows something of the truth. She is, in a way, all-seeing. She reminds me of Odin in a lot of ways, of Norse mythology. Yeah. She knows what's coming, and she can subtly manipulate events to move things in the direction that she wants them to move to bring about what she sees. She sees a sundering on the horizon. Yeah. And I think Morgan, according to Kieran, has certainly something to do with it.
The inheritor, harbinger of a new age.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What if it's Morgan who tears down the veil? And not Solus.
See, I'm not even sure that's the end game.
You think so?
No, she. I mean, oh, jeez, a reckoning that will shake the very heavens. I'm not sure she cares enough about the veil. I'm not sure that factors into her end goals that much. And I'm sure she wants to permanently kill the Evanuris.
What makes you say that? I'm just curious.
You know, the whole fact that they tried to kill her and everything.
Oh, well, yeah, I guess. I suppose that's justifiable. For someone of her caliber and taste.
Her hatred of men, this is a huge leap of logic.
Okay.
But I could buy she just wants to, kill every man.
Really?
And that's it.
See, I'm a feminist and I won't even go that far.
Yeah. I could buy that being the case. I hope it's not, because, I mean, it's not that interesting.
And then Dragon Age becomes the Asari.
Oh, jeez. Okay, so last thing we should talk about is, I mentioned this in my Andraste episode. Do you think Mythal is related to Andraste and or the slaying of Dumat?
Possibly. But the slaying of Dumat, that's a very interesting one that I had not really considered much. Where did you come across this idea?
Oh, the idea that Andraste was an old god baby. And so they the Wardens performed the ritual and then killed Dumat, and then Andraste had his soul.
That's right.
I hope that isn't the case. Like I said, I think Andraste should be her own thing.
Yeah.
And also, I don't think it then lines up with the Wardens. They want to kill all the old gods. And while we don't know much about the Weishaupt Wardens, I have to assume that if they thought the Dark Ritual was the only way to kill the old gods, well, then there wouldn't have been any other sacrifices.
Yeah. And there are on record other sacrifices.
Yeah.
I read The Last Flight. I love The Last Flight, by the way. That is an awesome book. One of the best of the series. Andraste, I think, is her own thing. unrelated to Mythal. And I'm not just saying that for the sake of elves can't be in everything. That just doesn't make sense to me. Man, there's a lot to unpack there about Andraste that I don't want to think about right now.
Yeah.
But what was your other assertion? I'm trying to let's backtrack. What was the other thing that you said? So the slaying of Dumat, or
do you think? I mean, ultimately, whether it's Andraste or not, do you think the dark ritual was performed for Dumat?
Oh, I'm gonna say no. I don't think so. I think that I mean, it would for story and trope purposes be a really nice, neat little package as far as fiction goes, and as far as a good story goes, that it starts with this, it can end with this, or that it started with Flemeth or a pre-Flemeth Mythal abomination, and there was this dark ritual, and then we have in Origins Morrigan performing the dark ritual. I mean, that it certainly ties it up from the first blight to the fifth, but at the same time, I don't believe that the fifth blight is the last blight.
No.
We still got 2 to go, and I got my fingers crossed for a double blight.
That's a weird thing to hope for.
I know, right? I mean, and this is a little off the rails of our topic, but quite honestly, the south of Thedas is so muddled in player decisions that I do kind of wish the developers just wipe a clean slate and declare a double blight on the whole of southern Thedas, and we're in Tevinter trying to prevent it from climbing north.
Nah.
That's
my dismissal
noise.
noise.
All crashed and burned and died. It's fine.
All right.
I get a lot of hate comments on my blog now.
For Mythal, is there anything else we want to bring up?
Well, I can't help but notice some interesting parallels, if you'll grant me a little liberty here.
Yeah, go ahead.
Just to say that, I think that in a lot of ways, and something that could be, I guess, discussed a little bit more, or that I wish I could see more discussion about, read more discussion about, is her role in this subversion of the establishment of the Evanuris. Whose idea really was this rebellion? Was it Fen'Harel's, or was it Mythal's? Was she able, with the idea that she is all-seeing or could be all-seeing, was she able to manipulate events in a certain measure, and it backfired on her? There's, and this is a weird crossing to the streams here, but I can't help but think of Princess Leia / General Organa.
Okay, go on.
That she's part of the establishment. She's a fixture of it, a well-known fixture, and yet she is under the table guiding and moving forward a rebellion to subvert that authority. And meanwhile, Fen'Harel is making off with whatever plans he needs to, is moving the cells and moving the people and doing the footwork. And he got squared with all the blame and all the guilt. And she, for the most part, in Dalish lore and history, just went off scot-free. I guess another parallel that I see between the two, and this is, tropes.com is great for this kind of stuff. But they were both betrayed. They were both mothers that were betrayed. Obviously, yes. Yeah. Flemeth, Mythal, Princess Leia, they were betrayed. Flemeth, although wasn't a mother when she was with Conabar, really all of the accounts of her daughters come after her possession. So that, and that kind of strikes me a little bit in that, Flemeth was, and also kind of reinforces this idea in my mind of a shared collective consciousness that Mythal knew that she would need to find a way to carry on, and somehow daughters versus sons, can't help but think of Muad'Dib there. The daughters somehow are preferable to sons in this effort to move this whatever she has planned forward with this consciousness. It's when you pick it apart like this, it almost seems really, really tropey, but at the same time, it's very deep and very interesting. This kind of history between women, again, this is all between women. This is women in hushed whispers working on this plan to bring about this harbinger of the next age. And Kieran, I don't know where he fits in all that if you have that world state, but it's a sisterhood of sorts, an angry, bitter, ancient sisterhood of damn the man. I don't know if wiping out all men is the goal. I certainly hope not. But I think that whatever it is, it's going to leave everybody at the start of the next game with our mouths open, more so than the blowing up of the Temple of Sacred Ashes. My jaw dropped to the floor when I saw that.
Yeah.
So and I absolutely believe it has something to do with this end game that Mythal has planned.
Okay. Okay.
Kind of.
I guess with that, this is where we'll wrap it up. Thank you for joining me.
This was a real pleasure and a real treat. I've enjoyed this immensely.
Me too. So another Talking Dragon Age video on Mythal is coming. I have no idea when that's going to happen because, as you can tell by the length of this video, there's a lot to go through. But I promise I'm doing my best. So with that, I don't know how to end this. SM, you want to say anything?
Walk always in the Maker's light.
Perfect. All right. Bye.